Today marks the 40th anniversary of the Rumble in the Jungle. Look at that video. Muhammad Ali knocked out undefeated George Foreman to win back the heavyweight title in 1974. It has been called arguably the greatest sporting event of the 20th century. Stephen A. Smith, I know you were just a babe, a young Chuck, but what do you remember about the fight?
You know, it's moments like this, you know, when I remember my dad, to be quite honest with you. I mean, my dad is still alive, and, you know, he's still alive, still kicking. But my father was a big baseball fan. He was a big boxing fan. But nothing compared to the fan that he was for Muhammad Ali. For all the reasons, Skip, Kerry, that you all can imagine, not just a boxer, but the proud black man that he was, and how he was so fierce in the eyes of such adversity. And he knew, my father knows boxing just like he knows baseball, and he can compete with anybody in terms of his knowledge of the sport. And to watch Foreman all of those years, to knock out Ken Norton, to knock Joe Frazier in the back of his head in Jamaica, and to watch him go tumbling down. And I think Frazier went down like 7 times that fight before it was ultimately and mercifully stopped. My father literally had the fear of God in his eyes for George Foreman when it came to him fighting Ali. He was scared to death that Ali was going to die in the ring, because he had heard so many stories about how George Foreman had told people that he literally wanted to kill somebody in the ring one day. He was that vicious. All of this stuff about Mike Tyson and other people, he certainly wasn't trying to be lawless outside the ring, but inside the ring, if he put you, if he put you 6 feet deep, ultimately, George Foreman didn't have a problem with that. He was that vicious, and he was that scary, to the point where my dad would tell me about, because I was 7 years old at the time, and my dad would tell me about how people, were telling him that folks in Ali's camp literally were walking around, they were teary-eyed, they were scared to death. And Ali was literally telling people, if you don't believe, get the hell away from me, get out of here. Because he was telling everybody, not only am I going to win, I'm going to knock this dude out. And Foreman obviously thought it was going to be a walk in the park, even though the fight was originally scheduled for September 25th that year, and ultimately got postponed to this date because of Foreman's hand, suffered an eye injury, I'm sorry. The fact of the matter is that the only person that didn't appear scared of Foreman was Ali. Other boxers were scared, handlers were scared, reporters were scared. Howard Cosell, one of my idols, this guy was scared for Muhammad Ali. Everybody was scared but Muhammad Ali himself. And then to employ that strategy, to play those mind games, to ultimately do the rope-a-dope, employ it, tire George Foreman out, it just shows you the power of intellect and intelligence, and how that can compete against anything on the right day. And not only did it prove that miracles could happen, but it also led everybody in the sport to recognize, and I think uphold boxing to this very day, that no matter what you think is a finite, foregone conclusion, you gotta recognize that anything could happen on any given night in any sport. And nobody embedded that in our brains better than the greatest himself, Muhammad Ali. It's just a special, special moment. Really was.
I love hearing you talk about it. I'm so happy we have the opportunity to talk about it on this 40th anniversary. Muhammad Ali was my favorite athlete growing up. And while I didn't cover the fight in Zaire, I did, as a young reporter at the Miami Herald, pay to watch it on closed circuit in Miami. And I am so with you. I went with such trepidation because I thought my man Muhammad was going to get hurt badly, or maybe hurt terminally. And that's not exact what you just said. I am completely with you. I was afraid he was going to get killed by a George Foreman that many of our young viewers don't know. This was a different George Foreman.
Not the grill.
This wasn't the good old happy George Foreman, the preacher George Foreman, the George Foreman grill George Foreman that we have all come to know and love. This guy was the closest thing to a human monster I'd ever seen before. He was certainly the scariest boxer I had ever seen. And remember, he would not talk to the media. He glowered, he snarled, he put on a great front that he did want to kill whoever he was boxing. And before the fight, Ali talked about how that's all he wanted to do was try to kill whoever he was boxing, Joe Frazier, and that he wasn't much of a boxer. And that further infuriated the monster who was George Foreman. And I thought, this is good. I went thinking it's almost like you're rubbernecking a traffic accident or something, you know, like I'm going to see something bad here. And I got to tell you, Stephen A., that night was the most emotional and exciting night of my sports watching life, seriously, because what I saw was the most shocking outcome I could. As you point out with the rope-a-dope, he leaned against the rope and pound away at his midsection, and he kept asking him, is that all you got? Is that all you got? I mean, that's the greatest line ever to me. Is that all you got, George? And George kept flailing away, punched himself out, and Ali knocked him out. It was just, I ran out of there after the closed circuit was, I couldn't go to sleep. It was just, it seemed like the greatest upset ever. Now I look back on it, it wasn't much of an upset because this was the greatest competitor I ever saw other than Michael Jordan. So
it wasn't really an upset. You're right about that, but George Foreman didn't know that because Ali was coming back. Remember, he had lost to Frazier. You also have to take into consideration the fact that George was menacing. Everybody talked about Mike Tyson. To put this in perspective for folks that watch boxing from the outside but may not really know it, Skip Bayless, they're under this impression that somebody like a Mike Tyson may have been the most menacing heavyweight champion. They don't realize he could, not when it came to Foreman.
Nope.
A matter of fact, Foreman is what made Tyson popular because that's the kind of menacing persona that George Foreman walked around with times 10.
Yep.
So it was it was credible fighters that were just falling like trees, you know, after getting chopped down by George Foreman, and then to see Ali do what he did, it was just so special. And it was like George Foreman will tell you that it's history being rewritten because he said the folks in Africa, in Kinshasa, Zaire, definitely what they loved him and they treated him as such. They just treated Muhammad Ali better, where there's this depiction of them hating George Foreman when he would tell you that wasn't true. But as Jim Brown once stated, what it really, really resonated, and Jim Brown once told me this because he was there with Ali, he was saying, look, they loved what Ali stood for. He was a person that wore his pride, his ethnicity on his sleeve because at the time they felt like a nation was trying to keep folks down subliminally, mentally, emotionally, and Ali didn't succumb to it where they felt like others did. So Ali winning that fight basically was a source of pride and from an ethnic perspective, even though you had two black fighters in the ring. There's a lot that went to this fight, man, and this outcome, and it affected me to this, it affects me to this very day, and I was just 7 years old at the time.
I was 10?
I was trying to add it up.
No, wait, I couldn't have been 10 at the
Were
Miami
you?
Herald.
Wait, you were.
I was a prodigy.
You were
wait, 7'2".
Doogie Howser.
You were 7'2", Skip. You were 7'2".
Yeah.
How about that?
He was 7
You were
as
Doogie
well.
Howser working for the Miami Herald at 7 years old.
He was 7 as
Congratulations.
well.
I was a prodigy.
Doogie Howser, MD, next to us right now. All right, Ali versus Foreman 40 years later, folks. Well remembered, gentlemen. Coming up next, do you remember something that the Panthers did?